The only people that Gaara really needed to address would be his father, Rasa, for even putting his son in such a position, and maybe some of the leaders of the sand, because they were the ones who were at fault. You're not addressing the things that people are getting on you for, which means you have not been listening to the actual critiques of the people that you say you're trying to get right with. One of my least favorite things about anime and just about TV and film in general, the characters in the show, once they turn good, they get like 100 times less powerful. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lauren, and over here we discuss life topics by analyzing characters from popular TV and film. So today we are talking about Gaara from the Naruto series, and our topic is rebranding. Okay, so let's get started. So Gaara of the Sand, one of the fiercest and most complex characters in the show, and one of the few people to actually look right with a face tattoo. When we first meet Gaara, he's this very menacing kid that comes along. Team 7 runs into the Sand siblings and they're picking on Konohamaru, and Gaara steps in to break everything up. And within this interaction, even Sasuke, who never acknowledges anyone, acknowledges the power and the strength that Gaara possesses. And as the episodes progress, we see that there is something a little disturbing about Gaara. He's not exactly as cool-headed as he seems to be. The kid's got a lot of problems. And his backstory comes out. We find out that Gaara was intended to be a weapon for the sand. They literally put a sand spirit within him as a baby. The sand spirit would lash out from time to time, and they wanted Gaara to get full control of the spirit, as its purpose was to protect the sand, to be the ultimate defense for the sand. His father, being the Kazekage, made the final decision that if Gaara was unable to control the sand spirit, then he would just need to kill him. And this was also his way to test Gaara's resolve in controlling the sand spirit. To do this, he pits Gaara's remaining ally, his uncle, the brother of his deceased mother, against Gaara to test him. And this is what pushes Gaara over the very edge. He is told that no one loves him. He decides that he is only going to love himself, and that he is going to get rid of other people. This is how he makes himself feel alive and relevant. And of course, this is one of the most disturbing backstories in the entire show. Once we find out what actually happened to Gaara, we can begin to make sense of his character a little bit more. But how do we go from this extremely disturbed and delinquent child to the most mild-mannered and regal Kazekage? That's what we're going to talk about today. How Gaara made his transition and rebranded himself to the point where he was able to become a leader of the very village that feared him the most and wanted to get rid of him when he was a child. We kind of see Gaara early on as this merciless, unrelenting person that doesn't care about anyone but himself. He does not want to hear what you have to say. Whatever you're saying is going in one ear and out the other. He is about his business, and that's it. And we can see this attitude played out in the infamous Gaara versus Rock Lee fight. It is not enough for him just to win the fight. He feels the need to finish Rock Lee off completely. He tries to get rid of him in the fight itself, and then he goes to his hospital room after that as well to finish it off. He is just completely relentless. He's extremely selfish and a terrible listener. So like I usually do, I give you guys 3 tips, tricks to overcome or to deal with the topic at hand, which is rebranding. So I'm going to give you 3 tips on how to rebrand yourself. We're going to look at what Gaara did and talk about how we can do some of the same things. So number 1, step into self-awareness. Now in Gaara's case, so many traumatic things happened to him when he was just a child, and there was no one he could really turn to for help and to get himself right mentally. And because of this, we see him misdirect a lot of his anger. The truth is, the only people that Gaara really needed to address would be his father, Rasa, for even putting his son in such a position, and maybe some of the leaders of the sand, because they were the ones who were at fault for putting Gaara in this terrible position. But instead, he took that out on so many other innocent characters, and so many people were made to suffer because of his traumas. So a lot of times when people have bad reputations, it could be for a number of reasons, but a lot of times it's because they're perceived as having a bad attitude. Maybe they're hard to work with. Maybe people perceive them as a difficult person, and they get branded as these people that
you don't want to be friends with them, you don't want to be around them, you don't want to go out with them.
And it's possible that that could be because that person is not very self-aware. They're possibly taking out a lot of their frustrations with maybe a few on a whole group of people. And because of that, they are put into a box that people try to stay away from. So when you become self-aware, you know what's wrong with you, you know who done it, you know what you can do about it, then you can start directing your energy in the appropriate places to get you where you want to be. Gaara's own siblings, Kankuro and Tamari, were terrified of him. They seemed to really dislike him. They didn't really want to be on a team with him. They didn't want to deal with him because of the way that Gaara had branded himself. He was hard to be around, and he directed a lot of his negative energy at those two, although they were not at fault for the things that he was suffering from. So become self-aware and redirect that energy so that you can get out of that box that people sometimes like to put us in. Number 2, listen to what people are saying when they're giving you constructive criticism, or what people say you're doing wrong, so that when you repent, you can be genuine and you can know what to actually address. When we think about rebranding, the first thing that kind of popped in my mind when I came up with this topic was celebrity and YouTube apologies, and people trying to get themselves out of trouble they may have gotten themselves into in the past, and now they're trying to come up with a different way to display themselves in this new social climate. While some people do that genuinely and organically, some people do not, and that's where we get a lot of these apology videos that people make fun of, because the public can kind of tell that you're faking it. And one of the reasons that they can tell that you're faking it is because you're not addressing the things that people are getting on you for, which means you have not been listening to the actual critiques of the people that you say you're trying to get right with. So when rebranding, make sure that you're not listening just to respond, but you're listening to hear and to understand, and with the intention to do better. This is how you make a genuine turnaround, as opposed to,
I'm just tired of hearing people say this thing about me and I want them to stop saying these things.
Well, do you want to stop being that way, or are you just tired of hearing them say that? Because if it's an actual problem, then you might need to really evaluate yourself and think about if that's something that you need to change, not just that's something you want to stop hearing. And as I'm thinking about these apology videos that a lot of us have been seeing on different platforms, I am reminded of Gaara's speech during the 4th Great Ninja War, where he gets up and he speaks to the entire shinobi alliance. How he admits his mistakes, how he says how he really felt. He said, I hated this world and all that were in it, and he was just being extremely honest about who he was and who he had become. He wasn't making any excuses for it. In fact, he didn't even say why he was like that. He just said, this is what it is. I was one of the worst kinds of people, but I'm here now and I'm going to do better. And he says at the end, if you want to settle this with me at the end of this war, then you can come back and talk with me then. How many of us are willing to do that when we are rebranding? How many of us are willing to say, I understand that I might be misunderstood, not accepted, not forgiven, but I'm willing to have that conversation even once I get what I want? Because Gaara was trying to inspire the group to fight. And that's what he wanted something from them. But instead of just saying, this is what I want from you, can you do it? He said, this is what I want from you. And if there's something you want to take up with the sand, that can happen too. How many of us are willing to do that? Well, it's necessary for a complete rebrand. Also, in listening to what people have to say. Unfortunately, and I really wish this was a part they would have included in the show, there were so many episodes, I feel like they had time. I would have really liked to see how Gaara made his way to Kazekage. We knew that he had that talk with Kankuro at the end of the original series saying what his goal was, and he was shooting for Kazekage, but I would have loved to see how he actually went about interacting with the people. Because if you guys recall, the people of the sand loved Gaara. After a while, how concerned everyone was once they thought that he had been killed by the Akatsuki, how willing they were to defend him when people were talking about him during the war. Like, they loved their leader. But what I would imagine is that after he had that talk with Kankuro and he had set his sights on Kazekage, I'm sure he went and spent time amongst people to hear their grievances, to hear what they had an issue with that he had done, who he had been, and what they wanted for the future of the sand. That's how he was able to go in as a Kage and properly and appropriately express the needs and the position of the sand. Like at the 5 Kage Summit, he represented his people, to be as young as he was, very well. And he was able to do that because he spent the time, he did the work, revamping his life and becoming a good listener. Remember I said earlier on, we could tell that he was not a very good listener. He was disobeying people out of the woodwork. People would tell him to stop, he'd keep going just because you said stop. And he was completely dismissive of the feelings and the opinions of others. He completely turned that around and he opened his heart. So corny, but he opened his heart and his ears to the people because he realized that if he was going to be Kazekage, he was going to be a servant. And in order to properly serve, you have to know what the people want. And finally, number 3 is to keep that same energy. One of my least favorite things about anime and just about TV and film in general, the characters in the show, once they turn good, they get like 100 times less powerful. They're just like the very minute that they decide that they're going to join the side of good, they get so weak and feeble. I don't feel so well. Well, if you're gonna be that pathetic over here, just gonna stay on the bad side. At least you give us a challenge and a good villain. If you're just gonna fall over as soon as you get to the good side, we don't need you. But they didn't do this with Gaara, and I am so glad. Gaara literally kept that same energy, and I was scared for a minute because after he became Kazekage, he was kidnapped by the Akatsuki, and they extracted Shukaku from him, and I was like,
oh no. Oh no.
Just because he became a good leader doesn't mean you have to take all of his power away. But they didn't. I'm so glad he still stayed the powerful, fierce character that he always was. So yes, that's number 3. Keep that same energy. That same energy you were putting into being a douchebag, to being a bad person, to making people dislike you. Go at being a better version of yourself with that same veracity. Don't get weak just because you decided to start doing the right thing. I believe that's the other reason that the people of the sand love Gaara so much as their Kazekage, is because that same fear, that same dreadful feeling that they would get around him when he was a kid and they didn't know how he was going to use his power, but they knew that he was powerful, he turned that around and used that to protect them. So that fear turned to pride, that fear turned to confidence, that fear turned to admiration and love for their new protector, their new ultimate defense. Going back to the Chunin exams, as I said before, Gaara just was not able to let anything go. He not only was going to try and kill Lee in the fight itself, but he went back to try to kill Lee in the hospital. He just didn't want to let any person go. If he had his sights set on you, that was it. It was a done deal. He turned that around to, if we recall the episode where Deidara attacks the sand village, Gaara uses that huge blanket of sand to defend every part of the village. He literally didn't want to let anybody get hurt, and he put himself in imminent danger and eventually was killed in order to make sure that no one was left behind, that no one got hurt. He had that same mindset, but now he turned it around and used it for good. And I think that's really important. I think more of us should do that, because sometimes we're fooled into thinking that when we're becoming a better version of ourselves, we have to get rid completely of all of the ways that we used to have, and that's not necessarily the case. Any trait or characteristic that you can have can be used for good or used for bad. It can be toxic or it can be productive, and it depends all on how you put it into use. So let's remember that as well. So that is it, you guys, for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you want to be alerted when I post new videos. Do all of the things. And I want you to answer this question in the comments. Have you ever tried to change or rebrand your image? And if so, in what way? Let us know below if you like. And I will see you guys in the next video.